Hi, I'm Peter Tragos, host of the Lawyer You Know podcast and YouTube channel. The saying goes, everyone hates lawyers until you need one. Well, I'm here when you need one to answer your questions and give you insight that you didn't know you needed. Along with my partners, Pete Sardis, the professor, who has a finance and business background, and George Tragos, my dad, and the consigliere, a criminal defense giant, we can answer any questions you have.
Hi everybody, Pete Sardis for the Lawyer You Know. We are back talking about the Hulu miniseries, The Dropout. Today we are talking about episode 6 entitled Iron Sisters. We're going to go through what's true, what's not, and what's true-ish. But before we do that, as always, if you like the episode, give me a thumbs up. If you're enjoying the series, please subscribe to our channel. And as always, if you have questions or comments about this series, Elizabeth Holmes, Theranos, or the Sunny Balwani trial that we're also covering at the same time, please let me know and we'll make sure we answer those questions for you. All right, let's talk about episode 6. It is entitled Iron Sisters, and I'm trying to figure out why they picked Iron Sisters for this particular episode. For those of you that don't know the real story behind Iron Sisters, it was a empowerment movement for women regarding, science, technology, engineering, math, and business that Elizabeth Holmes was, I think, front and center of back in about 2015, give or take. This concept was designed to help, professional women help other professional women, empower them, bring girls and women into science, technology, and math, and really help bolster females in that, area, because there really weren't that many. So that's what the real Iron Sisters is about. But why do they call this one Iron Sisters? Is it because of Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz being together? Is it because Erica Chung is like the antithesis of Elizabeth Holmes? I'm not sure. So if you have any opinions on why this specific episode is entitled Iron Sisters, please give me a comment below. I'd like to hear your thoughts because this one just wasn't as clear to me. All right, let's talk about the episode generally. We start off by seeing the friendship grow between Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz. And this is very real, and I think it's a very good representation in the miniseries about what actually happened in real life. Erica Chung came in to be a lab assistant right about the time that Tyler Schultz, who as we all know is Greg Schultz, the former Secretary of State, his grandson, came to Theranos, and they basically meet and become friends. There is, the dichotomy between the two. Erica Chung, if you listen to her real story, is someone that grew up, she says, in a mobile home with 6 or 7 other people. Obviously, very difficult life, and she pulled herself up from her own bootstraps and got into Stanford, got a degree in engineering. She's really a star. Tyler Schultz, not to take anything away from his intellect, but at the end of the day, Tyler Schultz gets the job because he's the grandson of Greg Schultz, who happens to be the former Secretary of State, a multi-millionaire who invests in Theranos, and whose grandfather, Mr. Schultz, and Elizabeth Holmes seem to be chummy. They have a relationship more akin to, grandfather, granddaughter, even in real life. That's how it was. So Tyler Schultz gets the job through his grandfather. Okay. So one of the things I think is interesting is when they first come together, Tyler Schultz gives Erica Chung a piece of tape and says, here, put this over the camera. And she's like, why? Oh, so they can't watch you. All right, do I think this really happened? No. Do I think that the Theranos folks are watching their employees? Yes. But the truth of the matter is, I think you all know it if you have a smartphone or if you have a camera on your computer. If someone puts a piece of tape over it and it doesn't work, you know what they would do? They would come over there and pull the piece of tape off if they in fact wanted to watch and monitor you while you work, because we know they have the right to, because the opening scene in this particular episode is Erica Chung sitting in the front lobby, basically filling out her non-disclosure agreement. And the things I think that are really telling about that specific scene is not necessarily how, Elizabeth Holmes walks down the staircase and she's, oh my gosh, is that really her? And she's enamored. No, it's the words that you hear during that scene, which is, you can't use the word X, or you can't use the word Y. You can't say blood. You can't say test. You can't say sample outside of Theranos or in conjunction with discussions regarding Theranos. And I think that that's a good representation about how in-depth these non-disclosure agreements were, not only for the people working in the lab, but the testimony was Elizabeth Holmes even had the guys cutting the grass outside sign the same non-disclosure agreements. That way, everybody was covered in the company. Anybody that worked with the company was covered, and even anybody that was an outside vendor or contractor was covered. The purpose being is they didn't want anybody to, divulge any information about what was going on at Theranos. Now, are non-disclosure agreements of this magnitude strange? No. The truth of the matter is, especially when you're talking about startups, tech companies, they keep their intellectual property very, very close to the vest. And I think that this is very normal in big companies. The question, though, begs itself here in the Theranos instance is, did they have the non-disclosure agreements because they didn't want anybody to go out and say, this thing doesn't work? Simmons Machine can't test anything. They're using outside commercially available equipment to test blood samples. I don't know. I think it probably started with good intentions, but as things flowed to the point where they knew they were not having success with the concept of the product, then I think at that point the non-disclosure agreements became angry. If you're following the Sunny Balwani trial, which we're doing as a spinoff to this, you will see that Erica Chung actually testified this week, and she was in tears because she actually was escorted out of the building by Sunny Balwani himself. And from her testimony on the stand, she indicates it was a very aggressive time. Similar to in the Dropout, where at some point Erica, tells Tyler about what's going on and what she has seen, and Tyler says, we're going to do a letter, but I'm going to send it, not you, because he realizes he's Tyler Schultz. Nothing bad's going to happen to him. And Erica Chung, frankly, and I hate to say it, is practically nobody, and he was afraid that she would be fired and she would wind up getting the wrath of the company on top of her, and he would be more insulated, which is what happened. They're pulled into Sunny Balwani's office, and he basically belittles them and says, so you two think you know more than we do about how this works. And there's a little bit of a tear down for them, but ultimately in that scene in the show, they don't lose their jobs. In real life, and I'm sure I'm probably spoiling this for the next episode, Erica Chung does lose her job. She's walked out of the building by Sunny Balwani, and apparently during her testimony in trial last week, she said that it was a very aggressive time. He was very angry. He was very mean to her. He was very belligerent. It was a very aggressive exodus from the building. And of course, we all know from the time after she left Theranos, they had, meaning Elizabeth Holmes and the Theranos company, had private investigators tailing her. They actually served her with cease and desist orders right in front of her car in the evening at her new job. It was pretty, it was definitely contentious, to say the least. Things that you would not expect to see in the normal course of business. So, staying with Erica Chung's character, after that scene where she and Tyler Schultz are pulled in and basically dressed down, we find her working in the Theranos lab on Thanksgiving evening all by herself. Do I think that happened? No. Do I think that they made her work some odd shifts? Probably yes, but we know, again, from the testimony that this was common, especially during this time frame. There were people working 24 hours a day. So I believe that they were working on Thanksgiving evening. I don't think she was alone. So do I think that as she's working alone, she realizes that these test results for a real person are inconclusive, so she calls it in? Yeah, that's probably true. She probably spoke to someone saying, hey, I'm not getting the lab results that are consistent in this particular reading. What should we do? Now, do I think somebody just opened the door, kind of cloak and dagger, walked to the computer, erased the the outliers that were inconclusive to give a result? No. I think that's probably a little bit of theatrical drama, but I think it makes the point that they really did do these things. They wound up taking real patients' blood samples, and if there were outliers that could not be rectified, they just deleted those outliers from the data. I would guess that it was not Erica Chung that did that. I would guess it was somebody higher up the food chain that was aware of, obviously, the problems they were having with the technology. But anyway, good representation about what was happening at that particular time. So now, does Erica Chung actually walk around the lab in the dark and pull a sticker off of the Theranos testing machine to reveal that it is a Simmons machine underneath? Again, probably not. But to the credit of the writers, I think it makes the point that what wound up happening in real life is that Theranos' machine, Edison, was not providing results that were accurate, number one. Number two, based on the testimony from the trial, we know that not only was the Edison machine not providing accurate results, it was hard to keep the machine online because every time it would fail, they would have to do diagnostics, they would have to reboot the system, and this apparently took hours to do. So there was no way that they were able to really work the Edison machine at this point in time. So what did they do? They used commercially readily available machines, diluted the blood samples, and gave you results based on what was already available. And is that wrong? Probably not wrong, because I'll tell you, Siemens would have been happy to sell them the technology, to sell them the use of their machinery, because that's what they do. They sell machines to do blood tests. What was wrong is to take that blood test, run it on the Siemens machine, and then tell everybody this is the result from the Edison machine. That's where things went south. But again, a little bit of creative license on behalf of the writers. I don't think they actually were stupid enough just to put a sticker over it and nobody would notice. But the concept, in fact, is true. There were commercially available machines at the Theranos facility where blood work was actually run. My guess is what they probably told people was they were validating tests, because you really can't hide the Siemens machines. They look so different than the little box that looks basically like a hard drive that was Edison, that was supposed to go inside of the Walgreens stores, as opposed to a big, what would look like a big copy machine size piece of equipment, which is what the Siemens blood testing machine actually looks like. So let's go on. Sunny Balwani. I want to talk about Sunny Balwani a bit. In this episode, there is a time when they're walking into Elizabeth Holmes' birthday party. And he says, I want everybody to know, I'm going to tell everybody about us. And Elizabeth Holmes, kind of, big eyes, and actually it's Amanda Seyfried's big eyes. No, don't do it, not tonight. I don't know what it must have been like for Sunny Balwani, and I'm going to show a little bit of empathy towards him. To be in a relationship with somebody for nearly 7 years and to not have anybody outside of, I'm guessing, a very small circle of people, a very small trusted group of people, know that you're in a relationship. I can't imagine how difficult that would be to live your entire life in the daytime as professionals and colleagues, and then to go home to the same house every night and nobody knew. It must have been very difficult for him, just because I think there comes a point where you grow that emotional bond that you want everybody to know, hey, this is my significant other, this is my counterpart. And that apparently did not happen. Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani moved in together back in 2005. And if you remember a couple of episodes back, Sunny Balwani actually shows Elizabeth Holmes a Palo Alto house that was for sale for like $9 million or whatever it was, that they actually wound up buying, living in together, and utilizing for kind of company parties and marketing type activities. So Sunny Balwani starting to get annoyed on the show about the fact that nobody knows that he's in a relationship with Elizabeth Holmes after all of these years. I can understand why this was a problem for Elizabeth Holmes, because the disclosure about her personal relationship with Sunny Balwani had not been made. And I believe that that is a material piece of information that you as an investor especially would want to know about the COO of the company. You'd want to know that, hey, he is X, Y, and Z as a professional. These are the things that he's done. Here's how much money he has loaned the company. Here's how much money he's invested towards equity. Oh, and by the way, he's my boyfriend. I think that's kind of an important part of the information that was left out. And I think that may have been one of the things that caused concern, at least in the eyes of the jury, when they recognize that this whole relationship's going on that's kind of a secret. So we're starting to see that kind of work itself out. Let's see how the rest of the episodes kind of develop that topic. Let's talk about Mr. Fuse in his lawsuit with the combination of him and the professor from Stanford and John Carreyrou. Let's start with some basics. Did Fuse actually contact John Carreyrou? Yes. And if you ask John Carreyrou, he will tell you it was Fuse that was the catalyst to bringing this story to his attention. Because of the lawsuit, Fuse was basically trying to find a way to get around Elizabeth Holmes, and he at that point thought that she was a fraud. So he started digging. And but for Fuse contacting Carreyrou, and then John Carreyrou basically developing what he would need as a journalist to be able to break this story, and then Fuse looking at it going, okay, we need this, we need this, we need that. This really happened. Did people from Theranos actually open up to Fuse? Yes, they did. Now, you'll see a part of the story, again, a little bit of cloak and dagger, I believe. Did it happen at night in a parking lot? And, the lab director, whose name is Mark in the show, gets in the car and says, I won't go on the record. I've got a non-disclosure. I can't violate it, but there are some stuff going on here. Do I think that happened in that way? No. Do I think it happened? Absolutely. Mark's playing a character whose real name was Adam Rosendorf. Adam Rosendorf was the lab director at Theranos, and he was also one of the big witnesses in the Elizabeth Holmes trial who came in and said, look, nothing worked. She knew nothing worked. We were trying to keep the thing, together, but at the end of the day, all the promises that she was making, we knew were out. And again, probably going to be a spoiler for you. So he winds up walking out in real life at the time that he recognizes that they're actually testing live human being patients' blood and sending results that he knows are not accurate. He winds up walking out of the company. So again, the way it happened, true-ish, but ultimately the concept is sound. So with that, we're probably going to wind up seeing in the next episode how Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz's exodus from Theranos happens. And if you remember, Tyler Schultz was very vocal. He actually went to his grandfather and said, hey, granddad, this is a fraud. Of course, Tyler Schultz's grandfather, George Schultz, didn't believe him. And if you listen to the family story after the fact, it sounds like there was a rift between grandfather and grandson about this topic. And I don't know if it's a rift because of the humongous loss of money, or if it's a rift because the grandfather saw the grandson, meaning Tyler, as just, he's young, you don't know, stop saying stupid things, everything is fine. I'm George Schultz. I've brokered peace throughout the world. I know what I'm doing here. But there was some tension between them, and Tyler Schultz was very public. And as you recall in the news, he was the one that actually went out there and said, hey, this doesn't work. On the opposite side, Erica Chung was not very public about it, but she was she was the whistleblower. Ultimately, she's the one that went to court, got up on the stand and testified, produced documents, produced evidence for the prosecution regarding what was going on at Theranos at this point in time. So I'm guessing you're going to see the very public side of Tyler Schultz out there in the media and the very private but important role that Erica Chung played by providing evidence to not only John Carreyrou, but also the prosecutors in this case in the upcoming episode. So with that, again, if you've enjoyed the episode, give me a thumbs up. If you've liked the series, please subscribe. And as always, leave me questions, comments below, especially your opinion this time about the title of this episode. Why do you think they came up with Iron Sisters? Again, if you're interested in the Sonny Balwani trial, we are contemporaneously covering that, so check those videos, and we'll see you again.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.